Hi,
Hello there.
I'm Dylan McKinnon,
And I'm Ben Sanford.
and we are two great apes, lifelong friends who have been involved in outdoor education, tree work, and all sorts of fun and organic, grungy activities. And we are talking about life, the universe, and everything in between. We have done a previous podcast about first fire. This is our second, and today's subject, which I'm so delighted to be talking about, is the plausibility of a Tarzan scenario, a human child raised by a great ape, a non-human great ape of some sort, and growing up to become not just surviving amongst chimps or gorillas, orangutans maybe, but also being a functional, healthy adult human being. So there we go. Ben, start us off.
Cool. So yeah, this is I think fascinating to me and just something I've always been curious about and loved because partly my influence from reading all the Tarzan books when I was 14, and changed my life and tried to be Tarzan. Um, so what do you
Tried.
try? Yeah. But it did, yeah, I think it did influence like my whole career choice of climbing trees for a living and like Tarzan's tree service. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. But so I guess maybe a place to start is, I mean, I was just in thinking about this question, I was actually researching, are there well, in the books, we'll just go with that. We'll just start,
Yes,
maybe we
start.
should just let's just reference the Tarzan story a little bit. How about that? Because not everyone, everyone knows the movies,
Yeah.
but the books are a different deal. Some of them are obviously fictional, and maybe all of them, but there is a book called Tarzan Alive, which was written by another author that did a lot of research on Burroughs and the Tarzan story and stuff, and he's pretty convinced that there's something behind it, which is kind of interesting. So, and the way Burroughs started it, he claims that he just intended to write the first one based on a story he heard from a naval officer who told him the story after getting drunk one day of a man found in Western Africa, right? So
Yeah.
um, that's interesting. But regardless, what there are other stories of feral kids being found. I mean, I was just thinking of the Wolf Boy of France, right? That was like the
Yeah.
early 1800s.
1820s, 1830s,
Yeah,
something
yeah,
like that.
yeah. And then
Yeah.
more recently, I found the story of the woman in South America that was she lived with monkeys
Yeah.
for
With
like
the
3 years or something,
yeah,
two
was it
years.
was it Venice it was Venezuela or Colombia, I think.
Okay, yeah.
Something like
So
that.
I mean, and that was like a couple years as a young girl. Like he thinks she was like 4 or 6 or something. I don't know. It's crazy.
I seem to recall she said, and maybe we'll include a link to the in the
Sure.
comments or something. But yeah, she was young but verbal.
Yeah.
So she was a child who had recollections of her human past and had speech, which she subsequently lost the habit of.
Yeah.
But she had been was it she'd been for whatever, I forget the circumstances under which she ended up living with
She
this
was
group of.
she was abducted, it sounded like, or something was going on. She was taken from her family and then she escaped.
Yeah,
She was put in the woods and left there, actually.
yeah.
Strange. Yeah. I haven't read the book, but I do want to. Um anyway, so in the Tarzan story, basically the family is Tarzan's parents are marooned in the coast of Africa. I don't remember exactly where. But equatorial, the jungly
somewhere
areas.
somewhere in that see
Yeah, right, right.
somewhere in the nook there around Ghana, and
Yeah,
where the major rivers flowed out, and that just the most basic plausibility, that's where you have, because it refers to the different you know tribes or species. They refer to them as tribes, different species of apes, so referring to the gorillas, chimps. I seem to recall that Burroughs made a distinction
yeah, he
that
did.
the creatures that raised Tarzan weren't chimps. They were a larger, more aggressive creature, but also not gorillas. And the
Exactly.
cool thing was, it
Yeah.
was said for so long, like, oh, that's not an official ape. And then the billy apes, the giants, the oversized chimps, were
Oh,
discovered in Central Africa.
really? I was gonna ask you because that's yeah, because he just calls them like anthropoid, like man-like apes that
Yeah.
were as comfortable on 2 feet as they were on four.
Yeah.
What is this other chip species?
Uh, oh gosh, I feel like Joe Rogan now. So it's just separate those associations. So they've been referred to as the billy ape or Bili ape, Bili. It's like a region in along one of the rivers that drains from Central Africa, and they are chimpanzees, but they're morphologically distinct. They're larger, like much larger. Like when they stand on their hind legs, so they stand, bipedally. They're
Huh,
about 6 feet tall. So it's
holy
like an
cow.
average. It's like an average sized. It's closer to gorilla size. And the most important thing is they nest on the ground,
Hmm.
which is just it's completely outside of normal chimp behavior. I think some of the local terms then translate to like lion killers or something. So it's a chimp that is. I'm trying to. There's a couple weird things about their behavior. Think it was. I think one of the weirder things, they weren't as afraid of humans as is typical for chimpanzees. Like chimps are generally much more shy of humans. And I hope I'm not misremembering. I hope it's not like the complete opposite. Oh, they're terrified. But I seem to recall part of the deal is they're relatively indifferent to humans, or like described to be almost like elephants. Like they notice humans and they're kind of annoyed, but they don't just book it into the woods. Um, and I was trying to. It's still, it was only recently sort of acknowledged in the zoological community that this is a phenomenon. These are these larger chimps, but it seems a pretty good match for what Burroughs
Yeah,
is describing.
very good.
And I think the one other thing that they had, I seem to recall that the males, they might have like more of a sagittal crest. The jaw
Mhm.
muscle attachment. Like chimps have that. They have a sagittal crest, so our jaw muscles end like here on our heads,
Yeah,
around our temple. But theirs go all the way up. But theirs are just higher, so it's more of a mound. So it's got more of that
gorilla-like.
cone-headed thing like a
Yeah,
gorilla.
yeah. Wow, cool. Um, okay, so plausible species for at least that follows the story.
Yeah. So I'm
Lost you
trying
on
to.
camera there.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's see.
Um,
Back. Oh, wait. Here we
is
go. That's the problem of trying to do a podcast
primates.
graybacks such as us. Is my camera's not mirrored, so when I move left, it moves right.
Yeah, I had that. Um, it is like it looks like a chimp probing at the camera. It's hilarious.
Yeah, it's a game camera. That's exactly what it feels like. Wait,
Make the noise.
wait.
Uh, uh, so we won't be editing any of these, by the way. Anyone who's watching, this is just raw.
all all raw. The only way to do it genuinely.
Um, yeah, so I had not heard of that. I I think I had heard that there may be a species, but I had not heard that much info. So this is my first time. Thank you for that. That's exciting.
Wonderful. So I guess it's they're genetically distinct, but they're related. They're distinct from, but related to the other chimps in the area. But it doesn't seem like the populations are interbreeding as much. So it seems to be if it's not a distinct species per se, it's a distinct morphology or phenotype. So like the way feral dogs or wild Canis familiaris can live in in the same areas as wolves, the same species, but they don't interbreed as much because they're just behaviorally different enough from each other.
Hmm.
Mm. But it
Well,
sounds what?
I was just gonna say, speaking of behavioral traits, do you know anything about them in terms of the like? I mean, would they be able to adopt a young human?
So to that question, how so going by the Tarzan, how old was Tarzan when he was adopted?
He was born there.
He was
So
born.
yeah.
When did
So
when did the when did his mother Kala pick him up and start caring for him? He was still nursing.
he was still nursing. He was in the story. His mother actually never recovered from his birth, I think, is the story. She got sick.
So
And so
he
he's
was he was
quite
he
young.
was little.
He was little. And
Okay, cool.
then yeah, and just again for the people watching, the story goes his mother died, and then his father tried to care for him for a little while, but shortly after was killed by whatever these apes are and trying to
Yeah.
defend himself. And then yeah, he was scooped up and traded out for, so I think it's also important that the female in the story had a dead little ape that she was carrying around. And she basically heard the cry.
Oh,
Yeah, so she swapped it out. So that seems like a, I mean, it may be fiction, but it seems like a
wow.
relevant, like a, yeah, that could be important. But
That had been denied by behaviors, that phenomenon of carrying the dead infant. So that's kind of cool. I've forgotten that detail of the Burroughs novel. So that's been observed. It has been observed in. I know for certain it's been observed in chimpanzees. I believe it's been observed in gorillas, and it's been observed a lot of times in baboons.
hmm,
So it's a thing that really intelligent parents do. Killer whales have been observed with dead calves, like bringing a dead calf that's like just falling apart, like ragdoll, still bringing it to the surface so it can breathe. So it's just so wildly desperately sad. But that's cool that Burroughs had picked up. He must have heard a story, because that's absolutely a phenomenon. This is gonna drive me insane.
here, I'm going to
This
pause.
freaking this camera. Okay,
So,
I finally mirrored my camera, so I'm not feeling. Those videos where you see, it's the latest thing of game cameras of wild animals reacting to mirrors.
oh
Like,
yeah,
this is the opposite, because for me, I feel like I'm reacting this to my face, but when I go left, it goes right, and it's
yeah.
like, no, no, there's only one. No, there's a list. And so maybe a quick side worth noting during our break. We're trying to sort out these technical difficulties. Ben, you mentioned how in you recently been watching Chimp Empire, and we both noticed over the years with depictions of chimp aggression, chimp anger. There's a lot of thrashing the environment. There's a lot of threat posturing where there is uprooting trees and throwing them around, just demonstrating your physical strength, how much noise you can make, and just how making yourself look that much bigger.
Yeah,
Uh,
impacting the environment, showing this could be you. Yeah.
yeah, I I love it's like there's an old National Geographic documentary about Jane Goodall's work in the Gombe tribe of chimps, and how there was a subordinate male that wasn't anything particularly special, wasn't particularly large or strong, but was clever enough that he figured there were empty oil drums, like 30 or 40-gallon drums. And for his threat posture, he found he would just grab these things, either grab one, drag, or just knock it down a hill. And it's a freaking oil barrel, so it makes a loud boom, boom, boom. Or maybe it was like, I think it was might have also been like kerosene jugs, like like 5 or 10 gallon with the D handles that could grip it. You would just hang and like run down waving these things, and very quickly became the dominant male in the environment. He's gonna make the most noise and have the
Yeah.
biggest impact.
Yeah. Interesting. Huh.
Which is always
Yeah, and we were just
it's funny.
referencing.
I always
Oh,
go ahead.
just referencing how I was noticing that I'm noticing that more in human behavior, especially on film. I mean, I don't see it a lot in the everyday life, but people thrashing thrashing around in the environment when they're angry or aggressive.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hilarious. We're just
I,
98% chimp.
yeah, it's there are so many. It's we're chimps with a better concept of past and future, so we're more patient. Which again, like if you took human attributes and put them on chimps, it's just horrifying. Like, what if chimps had fire? What if chimps could
Yeah.
throw
Well,
rocks?
it's Planet of the Apes right there, right? Yeah.
Planet of the Apes. It's
They win. Yeah.
just the fact that they don't throw rocks or even drop rocks. They wouldn't have to throw rocks. I'm sure
Yeah.
chimps can climb one handed. You have a good, yeah, this is like a maybe a 3 or 5 pound rock. Just one of these things, and just and there caught an antelope, caught a human.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah. Oh, it's
so, yeah, back to topic. The adoption of the hypothetical adoption of an infant human. Let's assume baby Tarzan is just I don't know 10 pounds. This was a small baby, and his mother had lost an infant. Absolutely plausible. Uh, Chimps do have prolonged grieving, and if you had a female that was already like that had motherhood that firmly centered in her mindset, and she suddenly had an infant to care for, um, for all you lactating humans out there, you're familiar that when you're lactating, just hearing another infant crying can stimulate the letdown reflex. So that absolutely is perfectly plausible. I think the biggest difference between human infant and chimp infant is that human infant is not strong enough to carry itself. But actually, that's even better because you have a female that's already carrying around, has that capacity of love to carry around an infant that can't hold on to itself. And that would be like the ideal situation for a female that's already willing to carry a child. She's not accepting that her child is past, is dead. But she's already willing to do that, to do all the heavy work of carrying the child. It's hard. A newborn chimp is usually actually able to hang on to their mother, their grip strength, they're physiologically advanced enough. So that would be like the ideal scenario, a mother with a ragdoll baby that is nursing. So that part seems perfectly plausible. Some other point I had about it'll come to me. But
are there do you know of any as far as keeping it alive, any stories of animals nursing humans?
yep. So dating back to the founding of Rome, Romulus and Remus were nursed by a she wolf. I don't know if they would have been good enough, neurologically intact enough to be good statespersons, but it's perfectly plausible. Oh,
What
I
about
know
apes?
that
Apes specifically.
I'm trying. I can't recall any verified
I've
reports of children being nursed by apes.
I actually have heard the inverse, right?
Not off the top of my head. I know.
I've seen videos of the
Oh, well,
inverse.
yeah. Well, in so there's several South American tribes. I think there's a great subset on that in I think it was a BBC documentary, Human Planet, that was describing humans in a more natural or primal setting, different tribes. And there's a couple of South American tribes. I think it's the Tainu people. I'll have to check up on that. Who they hunt South American primates. That's a big part of their diet, but they also just the cultural tradition of adopting and, in fact, nursing infants, so you don't have to be cared for. So it's a perfectly typical thing in their society for a woman to have, her own child on one breast and a baby spider monkey on the other. So
So
it's,
cool.
it seems to be a close enough similarity in just protein content, sugar content in primate milk
Yeah.
that it works. I've never heard any studies, and this is not making me want to do some studies on what are the differences between chimp milk production and human milk production. I just for some reason assume that humans might have a higher fat content
Huh.
just because of how the human infant would probably have. So that's another thing you look up is what is the nutritional needs of a young human of a human infant versus a chimp.
Right.
So if they're being nursed, that's a relatively benign way to first be introduced into wild foods.
Yeah.
So let's give ourselves the best possible scenario. This is a population of presumably a subspecies of chimp, and it's not an awful year or decade for whatever the various foods they're consuming. Let's also assume built into the story is hunting behavior or various aggressive territorial behavior. Do they actively describe hunting? Again, I'm trying to remember. It's been a while since I read. I see.
Yeah, they yeah, they definitely were hunters, so and meat eaters.
Yeah. So it seems perfectly plausible that from a nutritional standpoint, at least up to yeah, so a human like with prolonged nursing, particularly caring or accommodating chimp mother, there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to care for the infant. Assuming the tribe is able to tolerate the presence of a weird infant.
Right. That's a whole nother
They were,
question.
if they're already tolerating a mother carrying around a dead baby, then that presumably would be okay enough with whatever the unusual looking critter is.
I guess, and behaviorally, like, how long are baby chimps relatively dependent and helpless in their
So
development?
they're able to cling to their mother from birth. There's some assistance, but uh, that's the big that's the big difference. They are. I'm trying to recall. This is a cool thing. The technical term for a young chimpanzee is a child. That's the term.
I thought you were going to say Klingon.
That would be better though, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
Which means we call a human infant don't drop, a droppable primate.
so they
Maybe,
call him a child, huh? That's cool.
yeah, that's the proper term for them. The groups are they're
So like,
um
yeah, like cubs and kits and
yeah,
children.
they're the proper term for baby chimp, a young chimp is a infant or a child.
Huh. Okay.
Um, so they
Well, it would take an extraordinary. I mean, although babies have that grip so early, that's interesting. I wonder if that's uh that strong
it's
grip that they have. I
yeah,
wonder
it's
if
a
that's a
carryover.
carryover from
Well, it absolutely is. A
clinging
human
on.
so a human infant, because our brains are so massive, so that the real limitation is how the brain can only get so big and still receive enough oxygen in the womb. So we're kind of pushing the boundaries of what's physiologically possible with how big can the brain get, how much uterine development can the brain get uh, before the head is just so big you can't give birth, and especially with the limitation of we have to be bipedal. So there's all these different elements going on at the same time that we're absolutely on the ragged razor edge of evolution as far as being able to successfully reproduce. It's a much simpler process. It's still complicated. Primate obstetrics is still complicated. It's still a greater risk factor, maternal risk, but it's humans. It's a lot harder. So our infants are born effectively premature compared to chimpanzees. So a chimp infant is born with the level of coordination, ability to focus eyes, so as like a 6-month-old human infant.
Yeah, yeah.
So they're
Well,
much more. And go ahead.
part of that is due to our neuroplasticity, to the ability to adapt. Basically, we we don't come with too many downloaded programs.
Yeah,
We learn them in our environment based on, because we're so adaptable. We're so, like, what environment are we in? We have to learn that. It's very interesting.
yeah. What's the new thing we have to do?
What niche?
So as long as Tarzan's mother was supported enough, and when he was converting to solid foods, there was enough nutrient dense foods available. Um,
Was Tarzan a,
equi- huh?
was Tarzan a vegan?
Big gorilla sigh there. Uh, no, no, Tarzan would have. Sorry to the vegan viewers, but it's even in equatorial Africa, where that'd be one of the places where it's most feasible. Um, Chimpanzees eat protein, so
Yeah.
he might not have been eating mammals, but there's no way he wasn't including insects, grubs. There are chimp populations that have been observed. Let's see, is it chimps? I know there are bonobos, not those orangutans that have been observed fishing. I seem to recall there are bonobo populations that can fish. So like they'll take a branch and they'll steer fish in a stream to the shallows and then scoop or like frisk them up on
Wow.
shore.
Huh.
Yeah, I'm trying to. I seem to recall. So yeah, there's no reason to be vegan.
Yeah. No, I
There's
was joking.
yeah. I always, it's an important question. I always go to the I love, this is my favorite argument for like humans are naturally a more gentle animal and herbivore. As I heard, if you give a toddler an apple and a baby bunny or a kitten, it's going to eat the apple and play with the baby bunny or the kitten. But the problem is the only animals that the only animals that say, oh, here's a small thing, I want to grab it and hold it in my hands, and like that's what cats do.
Yeah.
Baby herbivores don't play with other small animals. They don't want to. Young humans universally want to hold on to and play with a rabbit or a bunny or something. If kids see frogs or turtles, they'll follow up and they'll want to pick them up. We have a pretty strong prey drive. I mean, we're also
Is that a predator drive or a prey drive?
Oh, prey drive. I hope I'm not missing my term. In behavioral studies, is like with predatory animals. It's the drive to pursue.
Okay, I see.
Prey animal. Yeah. So it's another side point there. I guess I think the biggest question for Tarzan is, first and foremost, would he be able to learn to walk bipedally? And we both both you and I have played around for years with human quadrupedal walking. We recently found that video of that fellow in, what was it? What was that? Was that in Colombia? I'm trying to forget where. There's Cuba. This guy who's doing primal body work. He's knuckle walking. So instead of walking quadrupedally on the flats of his hands,
Yeah.
So here's our class. Instead of like walking like this, but anyway, he was walking up on the second knuckles, the way chimpanzees do, and that's, I can confirm. Yes, I only started doing that from when I was 15, and my hands already came and finished their growth. But absolutely, you could. There's no reason why a human couldn't just go straight from crawling as an infant into more advanced knuckle walking, and you can move at a decent speed. You can move at a disconcertingly fast speed for a human on all fours. So that's perfectly plausible.
I think wasn't the wolf boy found running around on all fours?
Yeah, in India, you mean that one?
France, the wolf boy France.
Yeah. Sorry. I think they're like twin sisters in India. But yeah, so they're the accounts of feral children raised by canines, wolves, dogs, or whatnot, they're quadrupeds. I think all of them walk on the flat of their hands. So there's no, there's less parenting, there's less role modeling
They didn't
in
get
camp.
the
There's a woman who's still alive. She was just discovered, I guess you could say, in like, I think it was the 90s, early 2000s in Russia, somewhere in
saw
North Russia.
that. Yeah, yeah.
And she was, her the nightmare, scenario of her parents were just very problematically alcoholic, and she was left outside one day, and in the winter, and she'd survived by cuddling up with the dogs. They had like huskies, and she ended up being just like, oh, that's our kid, just lives with the dogs. So she was sort of abandoned and was, lived pretty unsocialized. It was like she was, again, I was like 3 or 4, so she'd already learned some basic words. That basic neurological development for language took place, but it's incredible. Again, maybe we can include a video in the link. Her, like, footage of her postures, how she moves, her vocalizations. Like, wow, whoa, that's the most amazing dog imitation I've ever seen, because she was raised by domestic canines. So I think so she primarily moved on, like, slowly she moved on hands and knees, but then for running she could bound. So I see no reason why, since chimps can walk bipedally, if we're talking about a tribe of chimps that's already comfortable with occasionally walking bipedally, or like if they live in a swampy area, there's a lot of chimps and gorillas have been described as they'll wade through shallow water. So if he was a member of his tribe that suddenly was like, hey, he's capable of walking on his hind legs and he's really good at it, there's no reason at all why he wouldn't start doing that. I suppose the final question, like, not the final, this the $64,000 question is cognitively, like his ability to speak. With humans, I forget what the threshold is. There's a period of time where a human needs to learn speech before a certain age, and past that, it's very difficult, not impossible for them to then gain speech. I forget. I want to say the age of 6 is what keeps coming to mind. Like past the age of 6 or something. Maybe it's younger. If a child isn't exposed to human language, that is the part of the brain, I guess, so like the Broca's area never develops, so they just can't speak. So, but that's in children that are locked in closets and just given food. Horror situations like that. But with raised by chimpanzees,
yeah, I wonder if there is vocalization,
yeah,
does that transfer, like communication through vocal?
Yeah. I'm just going to say absolutely a human raised by chimps will have no less than a chimpanzee's vocal capacity, be able to communicate, be able to understand. They probably have something of an advantage just because they have a bit more brain to work with. So, but that's it. It keeps on going back to genetic. Would the amount of complexity of communication in a chimp society be able to stimulate a human brain enough so that it can learn? It has can assemble basic syntax, sentence structure, because it's easy enough. It's easy enough to the kid would absolutely learn. So young Tarzan would absolutely learn threat vocalizations, play vocalizations, distinct sounds for specific scenarios. Like, it's about to there's a leopard, we have to climb, or there's a
Anchor,
or anger sounds. So with that does kind of what is the most complex chimp language out there, and would that be enough to allow a child to have enough basic language that when they meet other humans later in life, that they can then, there's enough of a structure there, their brain that part of the brain hasn't atrophied.
That's a good question. There might be
Oh,
hypothesis. Yeah, yeah.
so there is an example. Oh, that yes, that totally could work. Helen Keller
I
and
was
other
thinking of
children
her. I was totally
raised
thinking of her. Yes.
raised deaf.
Yeah.
So children raised deaf in an environment. She's just the extreme example, but there are many examples of children who, yeah. So yes, so that yes, that it might not be perfect, but children raised without any language, a complicated language, a understanding syntax, but they have, the amount of uh, body posturing and basic, not even sign language, but gestures. So,
Yeah.
chimps in the wild, they have the beckoning
Mm-hmm.
is a universal chimp gesture. So things like that. So, and there are so those children know, like, oh, if a child doesn't, learn, they'll never learn advanced English if they have this. So I don't know, perhaps there's some stunting, but yeah, that should work. That should totally work if he was interacting, enough emotional nurturing, enough play. Baby Tarzan will be playing with other
Yeah.
chimps. So that's part of the trauma of, isolated children, is that there's no play behavior. So the amount of stimulation that would have happened from, baby chimps are wildly playful.
Yeah.
So there's no reason why that wouldn't. So so we got some there. We can work with that. We can work with that.
Cool. What do you think about another question that comes to mind for me in some of those transition stages? So we got, nursing to solid food seems important, and the phase of being vulnerable, not, having to be held and carried and maintained, basically, seems like a longer phase for a human. And then the transition, so basically safety, like how would the ape population, particularly the males, I'd imagine, respond to the presence of something so vulnerable? Maybe loud if it cries, maybe, like, what do
So
they, how do they react to that?
that was so I was gonna mention that earlier. I'd forgotten to make the point. The other, besides being weak and physically weak and squishier than a baby chimp, human infants cry loudly. Baby chimps do not. They'll whimper, and it's incredibly human, very sad. Like it's a whimpering baby sound, but they don't make the loud like the loud noise that human infants make. Um, a human infant is, I think they might be the loudest. Like I think it might be something like no, it's definitely the loudest infant, but it's one of it, they can produce sounds in excess of 80 decibels. You could actually get hearing loss from an infant, a human infant. Like
Wow.
if you're holding him close to you, so it's just
Yeah.
it's like it's like a small caliber pistol going off, a few feet from your ear. They're very loud,
Uh,
and I think they even have like there's some kind of like reflex, like their hearing. They have some kind of protective reflex, so they don't deafen themselves.
it shuts
Um,
their
yeah. Ow.
wow.
That so that probably would have been that would probably be the hardest thing for the tribe to accept, is
Right.
the loud crying
Because
of a
that's,
human infant.
yeah.
So that would be scary for the other apes, and almost like, would that be a level of protection even in and of itself, like that from an early age it's so incredibly loud, that's something that would at very least give you, like, be concerning, like to make the equivalent, like, um for how much louder a human infant is than a chimp infant. Imagine, I guess it'd be like, well, like a human infant with like an air horn or a car horn, just like all of a sudden,
All the time.
yeah, and it's like whatever time you're like, oh, just feed this thing, feed it.
Yeah.
What are we doing?
Yeah.
That's
Well, even it seems like attempting to quiet it or smother it would kill it, like, or ape
yeah.
strength. I mean,
Well,
if they figure it out, I don't know.
apes tend to be, they're like humans. They tend to be very 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 gentle parents.
Yeah.
They have to be because because we're such an aggressive creature, sort of like that. Um, so this is one of like Dylan's laws of naturalist studies. The more dangerous and aggressive the parent is, the more gentle it's going to be with its infants. So gorillas, and they're just built for fighting. A gorilla is adapted to be able to survive being attacked by a gorilla. So they're very gentle with their babies. Crocodiles, very gentle. Hyenas, it's always the documentary cliche with jaws that could break the bone, could break the bones of an elephant. She carries the baby, so that's so the mother would be gentle enough and understand that her infant needs to be held gently. Um, the other chimps definitely would be wary of her, but wouldn't necessarily mess with her. So as long as he was raised in a tribe that didn't have an active cannibalism problem, and that would be then he should be okay there. It's described as he gets older in adolescence, having disputes with was it Kirchek,
Hmm. Hmm.
the the bull ape, the chieftain, as it were, um, but not just being pushed around and bullied, but not just overtly murdered.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
um, the question of physical, so it's I think Billy Apes would be uh, the best hypothetical species or subspecies to raise them because they nest on the ground. So a ground nesting ape would be the best bet for a young human to be raised by, because otherwise we're talking about having to what was good once they take a quick step back. Uh, Great apes build their nests and they learn from their mothers how to build their nests from an early age. But after I forget what age, let's say 4, 5, 6, they start building their own nests. Um, for a 6-year-old Tarzan to build his nest in a tree is just an extra level of complexity. It might be a bit too hard, but he's building nests on the ground. Absolutely, humans
Sure.
instinctively, young children instinctively build forts. So in equatorial Africa, there's never a bad frost. There's no reason at all why he couldn't build his own nest. So that's perfectly plausible. Perfectly plausible. Um, this is we both have worked in outdoor education and studied tracking over the years, and in missing persons cases with children, they have often like 6 years old, they have a better survival rate overnight than many older adults because they still have like you said, we don't have as much pre-downloaded software, but we have some, and children will still they'll sleep under a log or they'll build a pile of leaves. So I see absolutely no reason why a child couldn't do that. And also with even if baby Tarzan had some kind of mental stunting, not enough stimulation, there are plenty of accounts of children who are mentally handicapped. That children who have Down syndrome or nonverbal autism doing these things, building a pile of leaves and sleeping at night. So that absolutely, even if he could never develop, learn to speak, proper 19th century English as an adult, I see no reason at all why if he survived to be old enough by chimp standards to make his own nest, he couldn't build his own nest,
Yeah.
especially if it's on the ground.
Hmm.
Uh, After that, climbing, um, you're one of the better freehand tree climbers I know. I'm one of the better freehand tree climbers I
Yeah.
know.
You're one of the better ones I know.
Yeah. If you're in an area with easier to climb trees, so if you have more uh just it's described Burroughs describes climbing vines. If you have vines of any sort, like yeah, you can just go right
Or
up them.
or fig species, like any kind
Yeah,
of, yeah, stranglers with handholds
yeah.
and stuff.
I guess we'll have to go back. I vaguely seem to recall that Africa has less vines than
Yeah.
than other rainforests. It's fine. There's a little tangent on rainforest ecology. Apparently, wherever there's a forest with extra vines, you have more animals that have prehensile tails that can climb from tree to tree. And when you're in a forest with less vines, less the vines that Tarzan swings from, the botanical term is lianas, which I love. It's the most lovely term for a growth habit. So on the East Coast, yes, we have like grapevines would qualify as a liana, as would the introduced Oriental bittersweet. That's a liana. But in forests that don't have them, you see more gliding animals because you have to. That's the easy way to get from one tree to another. So I guess Central Africa has a bunch of gliding species.
Huh.
But,
And probably the leaping, jumpy stuff. Man, I love that. Those tree transfers. So cool.
oh God, gibbons are the most. There is no being on this planet, in my arrogant opinion, that has a more exquisite demonstration of movement. Watching a gibbon, it's like, who needs to fly?
Yeah.
Who needs wings when you can fly, right? And they can, they'll move it like, I think of the fastest primate on the
Really.
planet, from like going from point A to point B. A gibbon swinging through branches is faster than, it's like 30 miles an hour or something. It's some I forget what it is. It's some stupid big number, and nothing can cover a greater distance. I seem to recall it's no less than 50 feet. I want to say it's something stupid like,
well, if you count, if they're like dropping too, it could be huge.
Like
yeah,
how far, and that's given. So that's what apes used to be. They're the most. I would consider them to be the most highly evolved ape alive today. Humans, we're the most aggressive or dominant, but like the most highly refined, hands down, gibbons, hands down. They have they got a ball and socket joint in their wrist, so it's in their shoulder and their wrist. So when they hang on something, it conserves the motion amazingly.
wow.
And
Yeah.
put another. Now, you went on a rant, Dylan. Another tidbit about them. Humans, why we're so efficient running, covering ground, is that we have the same genes that allow the springiness, the shock absorbance when a brachiator, moving hand over hand, is called brachiation. We have to be able to absorb the shock of carrying the whole weight of your body, and that runs down the IT band, the ischiotibial band. I think it's in chimps and other apes. It's better developed for absorbing the shock down the arm, but for humans, around the outside of the leg, the outside of the thigh, is that that
the
tendon
line
that absorbs shocks. They're almost like kangaroos. So we went from springing from branch to branch to springing on the ground. So a running human has that same level of shock absorbency. So the transition from, I hate the animation depictions of the ascent of man, going from like walking all fours, and it always shows like humans like being stooped over for so long and slowly standing up more and more. Like it's and incidentally, there's racist stuff thrown into that as well. But like, no, as soon as you stand up, you stand straight up, and there wouldn't have been like, a chimp can be a bit clumsy on its hind legs, but chimps are more adapted for walking on all fours than our common ancestor with chimps. So when we were all one species, we were in a lot of ways more human-like. The human hand is actually more primitive than a chimp hand. This is closer to what the hands looked like 6 million years ago than the hand of a chimp. The chimps are almost like just slowly evolving hooves with their knuckles. But so back to baby Tarzan. If he's in a relatively benign environment, human children are amazing climbers. I think a lot of us human fans will have seen videos of like 4-year-olds climbing door frames. Have you ever seen that?
No.
Yeah, it's just
actually I think I have.
So just, again, go on YouTube, type. I did as a kid. when humans are young, our ankles are more flexible, and so be able to get
And I
your the angle of your foot closer to the this is our ankle closer to the wall. You just have better leverage, and so even without the prehensible, the opposable big toe, young kids can just climb straight up door frames. Their strength to weight ratio with their grip and their
plus they have a
body. So
they have a little different geometry and proportion too. So they would be
yeah,
it's like a little more like shorter legs and it's like
yeah.
don't they?
The yes, the
Little
proportions are
kids. Yeah.
so it's easier. I know I can't nor would I ever have the same capacity for climbing as a chimp, but I'm I have better I have a just because I have flexible joints, I have an easier time climbing because I can get my ankle closer to so, yeah, I can get my ankle closer up to my
Right.
shin and
Yeah,
just
yeah,
naturally have that deeper angle. So young children have that. So when they place
yeah.
their foot in the wall, it's easier they can reach. So he wouldn't have been as good a climber. He might not have been able to so if he's in his tribe, let's say they're hunting monkeys, um, he wouldn't be able to chase monkeys through a tree, but he absolutely be part of the monkey drive. There's no reason why a young human accepted in a tribe couldn't be part of a prey drive. Um,
Yeah. And there's
honestly, that would actually be that would what's that?
oh, I was just thinking of like the technical ability of and I would say style of ape climbing. Like when I
Mm,
watch chimps climb, there's something that humans in general don't do that it has to do there's some sort of like smoothness that they're doing. It has to do with their core strength too.
yeah,
And they're
yeah,
also the way they use their environment is different. They're not it's like they slide through everything. They're non-committed in their movement. So it's like you can kind of I don't know how to explain that, but I feel it when I'm coming down like cedar trees and stuff where it's like you're not grasping hard, you're just kind of flowing from one thing
yeah,
to the next. And that kind of just from the beginning, if that's your modeling, I think that would change how you approach climbing. And it wouldn't even look like, a human climbing. It'd be
yeah.
there's just like a whole different strategy there that I'm not sure how to describe it, but I think I've felt it, certainly see it in apes.
Well, we think when we because I've seen you climb, and it just moving a primate body this big, if you're going to do it um, without tiring yourself out, and you know resting this much weight on a tree branch without tiring yourself out, and without safety equipment. So I really think there's got to be chimps are afraid that they're afraid of heights. They because that's the most likely thing to kill a wild chimp. So they have to have that fear, but also the capacity to deal with it. So it's just
There's also in their environment, it's a different, I mean, it seems like there's layers of canopy and layers of vegetation. It's like they
yeah,
have, it's not, like, it's different than climbing trees here for sure, but it's like, there's like these different layers where I assume that there's kind of a different sense of security and like kind of, oh, if I mess up, I'll catch that on the way down kind of thing. I mean, I've felt that in smaller like vine
yeah,
maple forests and stuff. You're just not worried because you feel the canopy below you. You're like, I'll catch something
yep.
or it'll break
What
my.
so we've both done. This is one of the I'm waiting for this to become an extreme sport, so I can say I used to that when I was young. But tree transfers.
Yeah, it's
So
it's it's showing up, man. I just saw there's a guy on Instagram who's doing some pretty cool tree transfers. I mean, it's becoming an extension of parkour. They're basically turning parkour. They're putting it back in nature. So I can't remember his name. Um,
for our listeners who might not know what tree transferring is, well, how would you describe it? Because you do a lot more work with teaching physical. Uh,
well, I guess yeah, it's just basically transitioning between two trees, but generally finding the point in the tree where it's either flexible enough to move the tree so that helps you, or so you kind of pendulum between the two, or um, any kind of transfer really. I mean, it could be static, lower in the tree, just going from branches to branches, but basically just moving tree to tree without touching the ground. You know, that's not a very technical. I'm gonna look for this guy's name real quick,
Please do.
but
But years ago, I think somewhere buried in some old piece of technology, whether it's an old digital camera, or maybe it might even be on like a microcassette video, you know, video recorder. I had footage of me climbing, transferring from like a maple to a beech tree, and like my dad or brother mentioned, like, you know, I just does like it's weird. It doesn't really look like a human. It's like the sound, the rattly sound of the leaves sounds like an ape.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
always I felt bad, like, I can't, I just can't climb, I can't jump from tree to tree. I have to get the tree to do this. And then I learned that's how orangutans climb.
Uh,
They don't, they're too heavy. They
yeah,
can't, they can do a short distance, but they have too much of a gut, so they can't. So that's exactly how orangutans move,
yeah.
is to just go up to what we do from the top
Or it's
and hit
bendy.
swing, and that where's
Yeah, and it
bendy.
takes.
I
What do you say?
what's that?
It takes a
I was
lot
gonna
of
say the
for you.
you
You're
got you
dealing
got
with
you got you got to go. It's gonna you say first. Go ahead.
time and space glitches. He's on the East Coast. Um, the it takes an inherent knowledge of tree structure and stability, all these implicit kind of knowings of how trees work, because you get out too far on one species of a branch, it snaps off. You get out on another one, it's flexible, so that's.
Wow. Chimps would have to know that, and I've
Oh yeah.
never. So we know that, like in the pine barrens, there's certain trees you just can't trust. You can't trust uh, sweet gum. You can't sour gum. You can't trust tupelos. Nistel savatica. It's like, no, what are you crazy? This thing's gonna kill you. You're gonna die if you
Yeah,
climb this.
yeah,
Um, on the and just that knowledge, chimps would have to have that knowledge that they would learn from experience. Like, no, don't do this, and they have close calls.
sure, yeah. That's kind of what I was getting to with the layers of canopy too. I assume there's certain places you're more comfortable taking risks because you know what the ground's like, or that if I land on that viney kind of bendy tree on the way down, I can at least slow my fall. you know
I,
and this isn't like knowing propositional knowledge, this is like embodied
yeah,
knowledge,
yeah.
right? Just
It's
like,
like for any of us who've done any kind of high speed, chaotic physical motion, whether it's climbing quickly over a surface I'm familiar with, like rock hopping, when you have a boulder feet,
downhill climbing on large slopes of like vine maple, or I've done it in Yosemite in the oak trees. i
yep.
did it I did it on the wall at Waipio Valley, about 500 feet on a big
Because of
huge cliff.
course you did. Because of
Yes,
course you did.
in Hawaii, freaking awesome. Yeah.
Of course you. Waipio Valley. The only thing I brought back from my visit of Waipio Valley was a coffee seed, which is currently growing as a little shrub in my room.
Well, there's that cliff. If so, I don't
It's
know
so
what.
steep.
Yeah, it's so
Yeah.
steep, but it has a zigzag trail up. And so I
Yeah,
did the
yeah,
hike up, and then I was like, you know what? And I just went
yeah.
down the trees the whole way. It was awesome. Because you just bend from top to top to top. It was so fun. Did that in the
Oh,
oak trees near El Capitan too, on the way down at Yosemite with
nice.
Jai. Yeah, so fun.
Mine was my best climbing, separate from any time you get to interact with a banyan tree, which is just a jungle gym tree. It's like, no, this isn't climbing. You walk up. You
Yeah,
can have your hand. You can have boxing gloves in your hands and just kind of cup your way up. And just so it's like, no, this is easy. Obviously, this is a home. It's like, was this
yeah,
tree evolved for humans to live in? What the hell?
I know.
Um, but my
It,
tree to tree, actually, this may be a good time to mention for people who haven't spent a lot of time climbing trees in a wild setting, so not using we should make a distinction. There's the technological arborist tree climbing, when we have ropes and equipment and we're being safe and we're insured and everything else like that. It's a whole other world to climbing freehanded,
yeah,
because
it's
like,
it's
go ahead.
safety. It's also like, it's actually, a lot of it is just positioning yourself so you can work, you know? It's not
Yeah,
even, it's like part of it's relevant to climbing, but part of it's just like, how can I be free-handed in a tree? Right.
yeah, and the kind of works like you have your arborist saw is 10 pounds, 15 pounds at least. What's the lightest arborist saw? You only got one hand, so just you're not distracted by the climbing. But the you can, can you pause for 1 second?
Sure.
I have a phone call from a landline. Yeah,
Okay.
audience, what you are. A little interrupt there. So we've gone on for a little bit. Let's wrap this up. Maybe revisit this because there's a lot more meat in the bone. We've only brought Tarzan up to 12 years. Uh, a thing that doesn't get understood as well about tree climbing is that when you're climbing free-handed, the scariest part, the most dangerous part, is the first 20 to 40 feet until you reach the branches. The higher up you go, the more forgiving the environment is. So by the time you're at the canopy, you don't have to be as scared because there are more branches to reach and interact with. So if you look at a forest from a human height, like no, obviously we can't jump 50 feet from one tree trunk, 50 100 feet from one tree trunk to another, or swing. But once you're at canopy height, there's a lot more room. And it's just, if you can get up to that point, so Tarzan basically he's a handicapped chimp. Physically, he doesn't have. He's got from a chimp standpoint, he has a foot deformity. He doesn't have his foot thumbs, so he
Right,
can't
right.
climb. And his proportions are all wonky, and his head's really big, and he's not. He doesn't have his spine's doing this weird bendy sinuous spine, unlike the fire hydrant that chimps have. But
Different muscle density and yeah.
different muscle density. But if you spent your childhood, if you're a physically fit person, you spent your childhood climbing, moving from tree to tree, or even sleeping in trees, it's perfectly plausible, in my opinion, uh, that he could habituate to living a much more chimp-like lifestyle. And he's so it wouldn't take him the advantage yet. He wouldn't take him as long to learn tools. His hands are hyper dexterous, so all of the protein sources chimps get. So if his mother was teaching him how to catch bush babies, spearing them out of a hole in a tree, he picked that up really fast. His hands would naturally be better at doing that, or fishing out termites. Their thumbs are
Yeah.
instead of where we have a thumb like this, they might as well have like a pinky. It's a lot weaker, doesn't do as much, so there's no reason why he couldn't uh, raise in Ecuador, Africa, assuming none of his tribe murders him and eats him, uh, and assuming that uh, there's just enough food and he doesn't have to live off of food, that he doesn't end up malnourished. He should be that should be doable. And the question about speech, I'll have to look into that more. So if that sounds a lot more plausible now.
Also, the question, I think, as far as we're trying to bring questions to this, the question between nutrient density or appropriate nutrients of chimp milk and compared to human milk, like how would that nursing progress or nursing process go? That was another one I think that is probably testable.
Yeah, I know for a fact some zoologist or zookeeper who works with chimps. I'm trying to. I know I've looked this up one time. Like it's on a list of, if I ever die, please just burn my search history. Weird people out. Like, can you replace in replacing chimp milk? Does human formula work? Does human breast milk work for chimps? And presumably you have like it would go both ways. But
Hey, Dylan, I'm sorry, I gotta go. I
that's
just got a
okay.
note from my sweetie. So
All
fun,
right.
man.
Yeah, this has been Two Great Apes,
Yep.
and asking questions, taking names.
Have a good one. And we'll add some info in the or some links in the info. See ya next time.